I guess we'll get started then, since it's 5:30. So I'll call the meeting to order of the April 7th work session of the LPA. I thought it's on. I've got it on. Yeah.
Green light on?
Yep. Is it good? You good? Okay. I'll open it to public comments. If anybody, I don't see anybody here from public comments, but I will close public comments. And we'll go to order of business, which is the comprehensive plan update 2045 work session. So who's going to take that lead from staff? There's just not enough room on these tables for mics and all the paperwork.
I know. So this is, tonight the LPA is requested to provide comments on a portion of the city's comprehensive plan. And this tonight is going to be the transportation element. So we want to get comments from the LPA prior to the LPA transmittal, which is currently scheduled for Tuesday, April 12th. So the LPA has conducted work sessions on Tuesday, March 8th, March 24th, and March 29th. And on March 29th, the LPA conducted a public hearing and continued it to tonight. Actually, the public hearing was continued until April 12th. And then the LPA also scheduled a work session for tonight to discuss matters related to the transportation element. We emailed the transportation element to each of you on Friday. And since then, we've met with representatives from the Geneva Drive Realignment Agreement and to go over their concerns related to the transportation element. We have provided the document related to our conversations to you tonight, and they're highlighted in yellow. They're also incorporated into the transportation element. So we have Curtis Ostraka here with VHB and Cockline here tonight to go over the transportation element with you in details. And so I'm going to let them take over.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us.
The book
No,
button.
you have to press.
There you go. How are you?
I don't think I need to, similar to what we did for
Stay
housing
there.
and conservation, I think we can briefly go through the changes. I either look at this as either you guys saved the best for last, or this is the Brussels sprouts of the comprehensive plan where you've eaten everything else and now you have to take care of this. So as a transportation engineer, I hope it's the former, but we've been very fortunate in being able to work with staff through this. The transportation element, I think, feels like one of the most important elements to many people because everybody has to experience the traffic, and they want to make sure, we all want to make sure we get this right. There is a lot of policy, there is a lot of language, as you saw in the transportation element, and so what we want to do is make sure that this helps reflect the citizens of Oviedo, their wishes, as well as continue to set up the city to be successful in the future as we look forward to from now till 2045. As Deborah said, you received the first, the draft of the transportation element on Friday. I worked with staff for about 6.5 hours here, just sitting down with Teresa and Deborah and going through line by line and making changes, the result of which is what you received. We have also received some input and the changes that you now have a hard copy with the highlights, and you should have all but one of the maps. I received the final map from one of my colleagues just about half an hour ago, so If needed, I can bring that up, but the intent this evening is to solicit some feedback from you, have the board members ask any questions that you might have, so that we can go through with a clear understanding and hopefully acceptance of the changes that were made in the transportation element.
So you want to get some questions from us?
Which map is it
Steve,
that you just got?
Sure.
Steve, let's follow protocol. Let's not all just jump in, okay, please? So before we get started, you're leaving early. Do you have any questions before you go so that you can start?
Can I ask that everybody speak on the microphone, just because we have people listening on YouTube? The city manager wanted to be here, couldn't be here because
I know. I heard.
some emergency at home, but he's watching from YouTube.
He doesn't need to watch us. He can go away.
Daryl, for
Hello,
the
Mr.
record,
Cobb.
the chair has asked me if I had any questions at this time, and I said not at this time. My mic wasn't on, so I apologize about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Steve, go ahead.
What map did you just get a half an hour ago?
Sure. It would be the map, it would be map, in the map series, it's 2-6, which is the 2045 network capacity with the improvements. So this map now includes the proposed improvements, the long-range improvements, such as the Slavia Road extension, the extension of Oviedo Boulevard to Alexandria. And so the evaluation of the roadway capacity now reflects that extra roadway network.
Okay, thank you. I have a bunch of little nitpicky things that I will defer till later, if there's people that have more burning questions to ask.
I'll guess you do.
I guess I do. The first thing was, that it talks about the mobility plan, the mobility fee. So I read that later on in there. The fee is replacing something else you were telling me yesterday, right? So that's replacing the impact fees. Is
The
what's
transportation impact fees, yes.
happening. I got to relook through here. I got to relook through my list because I wrote these the other day and some of them might not make sense now. Oh yeah, I do have one. There was the one list that talked about collector roads and arterial roads. And Geneva, the road 426 out to Geneva, that was like neither. Or it's considered a collector, but not a major road like Mitchell Hammock 434, 436. Why is that? Because that's really the only way to get from here to there.
And that's one of my statements as well. Not only that, Lockwood is a feeder as well
Yeah.
at this point.
I didn't understand why that road was not considered in the same category as those other roads.
Okay. So with respect to County Road 426, no, I would agree with you, that should be an arterial. I might have missed that in the previous transportation element, it was shown as a collector, and I did not,
Okay.
I
So
did
it
not
should
make that
be-
change.
It should be listed as arterial.
Right, as defined as an arterial, it's a regional facility that connects to different communities. So in this particular case, it does continue to Geneva, connects to Oviedo, and it should be an arterial.
What about Lockwood? Because Lockwood also connects.
So you have a hierarchy of roads. You have arterials, collectors, well, I mean, so you have highways, principal arterials, minor arterials, and then major collectors, minor collectors, and then local roads. And the way they should feed into each other, kind of like the hierarchy. With respect to Lockwood, I think argument can be made for either a minor arterial or major collector. We can discuss that and see which one makes sense.
Living off of Lockwood, I could tell you it's becoming more of a feeder than than it just what it is right now.
Okay.
I mean, just trying to get out there, on peak. I mean, off-peak, it's fine, but during peak hours, schools, early in the morning and late in the afternoon, that road is completely congested. It'll take most people about 10 or 15 minutes just to get out of their subdivision roads to feed onto that road, because the traffic is so bad.
Okay. I'm just looking at Table 2.2 to see if there would be any impact in changing the functional classification of Lockwood from a collector to arterial, and it doesn't appear that it would make a difference. In the previous transportation element, it would change the level of service. So in this particular case, if the consensus is that Lockwood should be an arterial rather than collector, that could be, that's something that we can incorporate. So again,
I'm looking over there, and then I'm
there
looking over
is,
here.
I mean, so if I could play devil's advocate, if we take a look at Lockwood, I feel like all of the roads that feed into it would be considered more local roads. So Lockwood would then be collecting, or as a collector, to the arterials, which would be more like 419 down to, well, McCulloch would actually be a collector as well, and then to Alafaya. But it does serve a vital purpose within the context of the city. So yeah, it's kind of one of those gray area roads.
Just so I'm clear, the level of service for arterial roads is different than collector roads? In the new comp plan, in the proposed comp plan?
No, in the
Current,
current,
but in the new one?
in the proposed, the way that Table 2.2 is now written, it's more in the context of the different growth areas, such as downtown core, such as West Gateway, and that more or less defines the level of service, and there is not a distinction in the level of service between an arterial and collector.
Is there a road-specific distinction between level of service in the new comp plan, or only an area-specific designation for level of service?
Okay. In Table 2.2, which is shown, and I'll make this a little bit bigger.
Please, for us blind people.
Is that large enough? You want me to make it a little bit?
Yeah, I don't know if Daryl can see, but I can see.
2-foot letters would be helpful.
The way that it's written now, all arterials and collectors within the city's downtown core, downtown transition, West Mitchell-Hammock corridor,
I see.
Gateway West, all of those would have an adopted level of service of E plus 15%. The local streets within those districts would be E. We have eliminated the development corridors, and let's see, the collectors within are influenced by the gateway. So that is already incorporated above. And then all other arterials and collectors that are outside of that would be level of service D, as well as the local roads.
Understood, thank you. So based on what,
No, yeah,
so it doesn't really make a difference.
no, it doesn't.
But I mean, I'm fine if you want to call it an arterial.
No,
just
it
for
doesn't.
semantics.
The way it's written, it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter.
Yeah. But I mean, it does acknowledge the growth of that road, but I understand, and I always mess up your name. Is it
Kakwan.
Kakwan Ma?
Yeah, Cock 1.
Okay, Kakwan.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if we did make it arterial, it does sort of screw up the classification because everything that feeds into it is collector.
Well, no,
So, yes, I
it's,
think.
it's a no man's road because it's being used as a
Yes.
throughput.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, but there's just a lot on it.
there is.
Yeah, that's what it is. Okay.
There's a ton.
So I guess if we don't need to change it, then I guess we don't need consensus, right?
Right. I guess
Just to
not.
make sure I understand, so E, when road is at capacity, because there was a chart in there that I was reading last night that had all the different roads and it showed the traffic counts and the number of lanes and all that kind of stuff. I assume this is a summation of that list, right? Kind of?
This represents what the your adopted level of service is, it represents the city's tolerance for capacity on each one of these types of roads. It does not represent what the actual level of service is on that road, which is represented on one of the other maps. So if you saw a list of roadways with the level of service, then that could be what it is either today or in the future, based on the demand.
So a road that is considered a failing road, is that E, or is there an F designation that just isn't on here?
None of none of the roads within the city are proposed to have an adopted level of service of F. I wouldn't.
Even at the 15% above the E?
So, okay, so
Because I mean, that's,
technically,
Yeah.
that is an F. Okay, so it,
okay,
yes.
It's
So-
an E minus.
so why not call it an F? And be
Be-
honest about, I
okay,
mean, I'm not
well-
saying, I mean, I know we're playing semantics with,
Right.
with the terminology and all that, but why not just be upfront so everybody in the community knows that, hey, these roads are F? Opposed to,
Correct,
because
but.
they're gonna say, well, what is the percentage of an E road, traffic-wise? And then when you're adding 15% of what? So most people aren't gonna understand that.
Right, but by saying that the adopted level of service is F, that means it could be any level of congestion, and it would still be fine.
It'd be much worse than E plus 15, is what he's saying. So if you say F is acceptable,
But it's not.
But my question then is, so is that I mean, there were capacity ratings for each road. So when a road is at capacity, what does that mean it is? Is that F? I'm trying to figure out
Sure.
Right.
So,
what the rating levels mean.
right,
Yeah.
so level of service E generally means that a road is at 80% capacity of the theoretical maximum capacity.
Okay.
Now, is that based on the Seminole County's 24-hour count or a peak and off-peak count?
It can be graded either way. It can be graded on a daily basis, peak hour bidirectional, or peak hour
How are
bidirectional.
we doing? Yeah.
How is this based on?
This is going to be on daily.
Okay,
24,
Yes.
Okay.
so if we were to go off-peak and off-peak, it would be totally different, correct?
If we go off-peak, or if we go to peak hour rather than daily, then the volumes on Mitchell Hammock would exceed the adopted level of service standard.
Yeah.
what is the significance of that? Excuse me, Mr. Chair. What is the significance of that?
What is
The significance of, not the significance in that we talk about significance as in significance of it failing during the peak, if it was below our level of service, what's the significance of that?
It means that the road has a greater tolerance for the capacity on a daily basis, and commuter roads such as Mitchell Hammock, which may be deficient during the peak hours, would not be reflected in a condition such as this. So what I had proposed was, instead of the previous E plus 30%, to bring that for Mitchell Hammock, to bring that down to E plus 15. And the goal was to, there are consequences if we show that Mitchell Hammock is over capacity today. We would have to come up with additional improvements that are, and move those forward. So what I wanted to do was at least tighten things up a bit, bring it down from E plus 30% to E plus 15%, and still show that there would be a minimal amount of growth that would still be permitted before it reached capacity. And then once it reaches capacity, then if a development were to come in, they would have to mitigate that.
So, and also I want to make sure, is the timing of these ratings, is that as of today? Is that 10 years from now? Is that at the end of 2045 that we're working on? Where in the time spectrum are we talking about these ratings? Is this current?
These would apply to the entire span of the comp plan. these are your adopted levels of service. So,
So to follow that up, then, how do we know what the road is today? Is today the road at E plus
so,
15%? Or
so
is that,
that would be shown in the maps. Let me see. Okay, so this is the adopted roadway.
oh, yeah, I saw this one, okay.
Level of service, okay, so existing roads, 20, okay, so, oh, maybe it's not in this pack.
It was there, I saw it, it went by.
Well.
In the legend, I saw it. Right there, is that the one?
Okay, so no, this is just a graphical representation of what the adopted level of service is in Table 2.2 right here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so this shows which roads are allowed to be level of service D, E, and then E plus 15. We've eliminated the E plus 30. So although both E plus 15 and E plus 30 are essentially level of service F, we need some way of establishing a threshold of capacity for each of those.
And you said something about consequences if we showed it was an F. So it's almost like we're trying to make it be the E plus 15 because we don't want to say F.
So what would be
Because of the
mitig-
consequences.
Yeah, so that, exactly. So what would be the mitigations that we would have to do if we were to classify it? What do we need to do to make the road improvement? I guess that's the underlying question, correct?
That is the question, yeah.
That would be more a question for Public Works. However, there would need to be a plan in place, whether it's in their transportation master plan, to offset those deficiencies. When a development comes in, if there is an existing deficiency on a road, that road is backlogged, and that development, per Florida statutes, would not have to mitigate those impacts because they're not responsible for that backlog. If the development that is coming in causes an additional deficiency, then they have to mitigate those deficiencies. So by making a road show as failing today, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, but this is how the Florida statutes were written back in 2011, 2012. If a road is deficient today, if a development comes in and they add traffic to it, they are not responsible for improving that road because it is already backlogged.
Well, following exactly that thing, there was something in here, I think it was, there's one that talked about issue of development orders, and I didn't know if that meant development orders for some new development that wants to be built, and it says, but it has to have compliance with the roadway level of service standards. So if a road was already deficient, as you were saying, and a developer or somebody wants to build something on a piece of property that's going to add traffic to that road, if I'm reading this right, that means traffic and being level of service deficient is a reason for us to potentially deny someone to build or do something. Is that what I'm reading in here?
No, just the opposite. I think
Just the opposite?
if I understood your roundabouts.
Why don't you just ask him?
So if I understand what you're saying is that if we classify a road as deficient today, we could not have the new development coming in pay for any additional improvements on the road.
Right.
So if we classify it as an E plus 15, then we can have them pay into the fund. Is that the bottom line?
If they show that their project traffic results in a deficiency at that time, yes, that is correct.
That seems, I hate to say it, that seems totally wrong. If it does, to me, okay, this is just personal opinion, but if a road does not meet the service, I would think that's a reason to say you can't build. Now, I understand we've had the conversation, we can't tell someone they can't build, but, so,
Right. So
this is saying that they don't have to add to it because the road is already bad, so what difference does it make, in essence? Where I think it should
Right.
be the other way around.
And prior to, I think 2011 or 2012, that's how things were, okay? If you build on a deficient facility, you have to pay a proportionate fair share to help bring that facility up to standard. If you consider when this legislation was passed, it was during a recession when growth was essentially stunted. And so when it passed, it swung the pendulum the other way, paving the way for additional growth and development because the legislation basically says that new development is not responsible, should not be responsible for any backlog facilities. They are responsible if they cause an additional deficiency. So, for example, if Mitchell Hammock is deficient today and it requires widening from 4 to 6 lanes, if a new development comes in and they can fit into that 6-lane capacity, then they're good to go. If it's a large development and they result in having to widen it further to 8 lanes, then yes, at that point, they have to pay their proportionate fair share or find another way to mitigate.
And legislation, that's state law, right?
That's correct.
Right? All right. Is that what also means that it says in section 2-1.1317, it says future development should not be held to a higher standard than existing, and it's not assessed for system-wide deficiencies. Is that kind of what that is meaning, that if the road is deficient? Again, that seems counterintuitive to me also, that if somebody wants to build something new when the road's already deficient, they should be paying for it.
I apologize. Which
Oh.
section is it again,
It was
please?
2-1.13.17 I wrote down here.
Okay.
It was
Oh,
just
that's way
there was
down
a
there.
sentence in there that I was questioning, that's all. But it fits along the same lines of what we're sitting here talking about.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Am I in the right spot? Development of a mobility fee?
Yeah, the technical, halfway through, it says the documentation for the mobility fee shall demonstrate that future development is not held to a higher standard than existing development and is not assessed for system-wide deficiencies. So even though the new development, I realize would be adding more traffic, it's saying that you can't assess them, I guess, for the deficiencies and the fact that they're adding to the deficiencies.
Right. So it kind of covers what I was just saying, where if you already have an existing deficiency, you can't make a new development mitigate or contribute towards improving that deficiency because they're not the cause of it.
So an example would be, let's take the sod farms hypothetically, because really, that's really only the area left other than the spray fields, right? So if we were to classify Mitchell Hammock as an F, and someone was to build on those sod farms, we would not be able to have any additional fees on them because the road is already deficient.
That is correct.
But if we left it at a E+15 and they were to develop, then we could go for the fees, correct?
Right, because you cannot get any worse than F. So if you said your adopted level of service is F on Mitchell Hammock, you can't get any worse than that. So as long as if they add trips and they're not any worse than F, which is impossible to be, then they would not be any more deficient, they would not cause any additional deficiencies.
So why did we change from, I know we talked about E+30, I assume that means 30% above capacity.
That's correct.
Okay. Any particular reason why we lowered that from 30 to 15?
Yes, because 30, with the way that, with E+30%, I understand the concerns that the board has shared in the past. I've been your consultant for a number of years, and I've heard a lot of citizens provide their input on new development, whether it's new parcels coming in Oviedo on the Park or the Ellington or other projects along that Mitchell Hammock Road corridor. And none of the traffic studies had shown that Mitchell Hammock Road was over capacity. Having your capacity at E+30 gives a lot of breathing room for that development. By revising that to E+15, you're essentially lowering the ceiling at which of available capacity that is remaining on Mitchell Hammock Road.
Mr. Quick question. Mr. Kavanaugh, is it okay if I jump in real quick? Trying to organize my thoughts. So at E+15, from what I understand, that lowers the the standard so it controls the intensity of a development on Mitchell Hammock. If it was E plus 30, like you were saying, it gives more flexibility. If you drop it to E15, it gives less flexibility, and if a project is intense enough, that could trigger some sort of mitigation by the developer. Considering what Mr. Lopez just said with respect to sod farm spray fields is really the only developable land currently. I mean, obviously, anything can be redeveloped along Mitchell Hammock, but considering what is there presently, if we dropped it to something like E, for example, or E plus 5%, would that preclude development on Mitchell Hammock to include the spray fields? And even though I know it's off the table technically in this comp plan, but let's just use the sod farms, because the sod farms we did modify that zoning, and there is potential for development there. If we drop the acceptable service standards to E, would they be able to develop the sod farms without putting in those interior roads that we really wanted in there? Or would that become almost necessary in order to develop it?
If the adopted level of service standard for Mitchell Hammock Road was E, it would show that Mitchell Hammock Road is over capacity today.
Okay, so that would put it in failing essentially. So that E15 was a careful balance between keeping it from being failing currently and providing the flexibility for us to be able to get mitigation for development in the future. That's how E15 was arrived at?
That's correct. So in this table shows the current conditions on the area roadways. What I want you to focus on is the daily capacity. So at E plus 15%, the daily capacity would be 45,770. Column M right here, and I can make things a little bit bigger if that helps. So column M right here represents the current daily traffic on Mitchell Hammock Road. The last column, the volume to capacity, represents a percentage of that capacity. So at E plus 15%, the road is at 95% capacity between Broadway and Lake Jessup
Already, today.
today. That's correct. Hang on, and I can do,
There was a chart in there that showed, well, there was a bigger chart that showed, yeah, never mind. Sorry.
You overstudy?
so at E plus 30%, instead of the capacity being 45,770, it would be 51,740, okay? So now if you compare that with the existing traffic,
Yeah, I like 15.
So we're currently at 95% of the E plus 15. So the actual capacity in the road is whatever E would be. I guess 15% less off the 4570, correct?
And 43,489. Because that's today.
That's 95% of the daily capacity, right?
Yeah.
No?
the 43,489 is 95% of the 45,770.
Correct. So if we just had it at E and not plus 15, E would actually be over capacity at the moment also.
That is correct.
Which would mean that we couldn't, if someone were to develop on those properties, we could not mitigate the mobility fees.
E is F. E is F.
So by adding the 15%, it gives us that flexibility.
And when we talk about mitigation in a case like this, mitigation is what? That's the mobility fee? I mean, it's unlike when unlike mitigation where someone's got to plant a tree to hide an air conditioning unit. That doesn't work here. So, you know what I mean?
No, exactly. I know,
So
yeah.
what does mitigation mean regarding roads?
Okay. So mitigation, so I want to make one thing clear. When I talk about mitigation, it's with the current concurrency policy. When the mobility fee gets adopted, there's a different structure for mitigation there, okay? But what I want to do right now is, until that mobility fee is reviewed and adopted, then the current concurrency standards apply. And mitigation usually takes the form of either proportionate fair share, so calculation of how much traffic the new development is placing on any deficient roadway segment, and what would be the additional capacity to mitigate that deficiency. Or a development could pipeline improvements, meaning that they've calculated what their prop share is for their entire development, but all of that money gets put together and they will make improvements A, B, and C. Those are two very common types of ways that development will mitigate their transportation.
So it actually would be, basically it's financial. It's a financial
Yes.
mitigation. But it doesn't mean, are they actually going to have to fix something or build something? Or is it just,
When they pipeline improvements, then yes, that they would actually create, whether it's turn lanes or signalize an intersection.
So, yeah, so that was going to be part of my question, follow-up from yours, is what are the remedies to, in the future remedies to Mitchell Hammock for those areas? Or is it going to be just part of it or the whole road from Lockwood all the way to
Well,
417?
for Mitchell Hammock itself, the proposed improvements would be to create, and this would be in the Transportation Master Plan, and it would be one of the later improvements, but creating parallel facilities that would help offset the current load on Mitchell Hammock Road, which
So-
would be due to,
Not to interrupt, but the parallel you're talking would be either McCullough
Slavia.
and Slavia.
Slavia,
But
right?
Slavia isn't really going to do much,
well,
but the one that would do the most would be McCullough, correct?
In my opinion, my professional opinion, Mitchell Hammock Road will always operate near capacity. It's the tolerance of the driver to be in the level of congestion on the road because of where the interchange is and where the residential neighborhoods are. So unless there is some other means, if you have a lot of the traffic coming off of 417 and they want to get back home or in the morning, vice versa, unless you find a way to distribute that traffic to find alternative means to get to 417, Mitchell Hammock will always run at near capacity.
No matter what we do.
That's been true for many urban facilities. If you take a look at Aloma, 426 at the interchange, it runs like that. 417 at 434. So I'm looking at the two, interchanges north and south. In the afternoon peak hour, that's the one that I take to get home. And, what it's like on 434 at 417 between 5 and 6.
I come home that way as well, so, yeah.
So it's, everybody's just feeding off onto these, urban facilities that will be at capacity until there's some other alternative means to get home.
No, and the reason we're asking these kind of questions is so that the public can hear us, have these discussions and understand that is going to be an ongoing issue on Mitchell Hammock.
Absolutely.
Regardless of what we do today, what we do in the future, it's always going to be a problem. And I don't think, whether there's a development or not a development, I think that the community needs to understand that. So hopefully they're listening.
So what the city is trying to do is create development that do not necessarily put more cars on the same roads, right? So creating more connections. So Slavia will help local traffic, right? Promote mixed use, promote mobility of other modes of transportation, right? So if people can bike to places locally, that would help. And at one point, transit should help, right? So we'll have to have the density and intensity in the city to have, to be able to fund transit.
yeah, and to be honest, since we're talking about Slavia Road, I mean, that one, so it looks on the map that will connect with the Dr. Edward Stoner, so it really will go all the way through. So if somebody's coming from, say, Castleberry the other way, you know, instead of following past the mall and going down Mitchell Hammock, they really could just go straight, and it actually goes all the way to 434 is the way this is planned, right?
Yes.
I know there was a chart in there that showed timing of some of these roads. I don't remember where Slavia is. I mean, we're looking at the traffic today, but it might not be on the map for another 10 years. Correct?
Slavia would be one of the developer-driven improvements.
Developer-driven, yeah.
So if Mitchell Hammock, West Mitchell Hammock corridor were to develop where the sod fields are, it would need, some development there in order to help fund the Slavia Road extension.
Okay. Is that true for a lot of the different extensions and additions here that are on, I'm looking at this map now, but is that true for a lot of those, that they will be developed? Because like the one at the very end of Mitchell Hammock where the Winn-Dixie is, according to this map, there's one, and I lived back there before those roads were even there. I always thought that would be a perfect straight shot to 430,
Yeah.
whatever, it's 419.
419.
Right.
And then you put the Winn-Dixie in the way. It's like, who thought of that?
Yeah, right.
But is that developer-driven, or is there something else to make that little connection there?
I don't remember what the designation for that particular
Okay.
spur is, but a lot of the extensions are developer-driven.
Okay.
Duda, the, extension of Duda Trail to get to kind of the back of where Popeyes and Kyoto and the Top Dog Car Wash and all that is, that would be developer-driven as well.
But to Mr. Kavanaugh's point, the one that connects Mitchell Hammock to 419, that connector, there's no more development in there. It's a golf course and the Winn-Dixie Center. So how do we classify that as development?
I don't think that one should be development driven. I think that one would have to have an intervention from the city to
That's
occur because
exactly.
it's already developed. And
Right.
it's actually a residential, it's kind of green, I think, on one side and Mitchell Hammock on the
Right.
other. So there is,
Is there still a corridor there?
we have some land in
Okay.
the back, but there will be some taking, or if there is a redevelopment, so.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
So I'm going to open up another can of worms because you alluded to it earlier and in our last meeting as well, and you kind of touched briefly on it today, was really, people trying to connect to different areas, which really require subdivisions to be connected back. How are we going to address that? Because we addressed it a little bit in here, but it was kind of brushed over a little bit, from my point of view. And I think the community needs to understand as well that these subdivisions that are dead ends to one another can no longer exist if we want to reduce some of the traffic flow.
Right. And I believe.
And I know that's a can of worms, but it needs to be said.
I believe, and maybe Deborah or Teresa can help me, there is a policy here that speaks about,
Is that 2-1.5.4?
could be,
That one, right there.
That one there, yeah.
Wait.
The one that has a specific road as opposed to any other one on here.
Yeah, but there's a lot of them out there, though.
right, but I thought there we go, transportation enhancements are for interconnectivity. So the language is there. It doesn't mandate it, but there's language there that encourages that, and it should be part of the discussion when new development does come in for the staff, the board, and the council to look for opportunities where they can interconnect and that you don't have commercial or residential that,
But that's great for new development, right?
that's correct.
But existing development or existing subdivisions, and we all know what we're all talking about, how do we address it there?
Can you scroll down to that? I'm missing that page.
No, you
No,
don't
it's
have
not
that
on-
on there.
it's not
That's just a summary, that's just a summary report. That's the one,
Yeah, could you go to that Pine Street one again?
Oh, sure.
the one you live on?
No, I don't care about it.
Oh, back
I
up.
care about it.
There it is.
Yeah.
I don't like that one.
No, yeah, specifically, why are we carving out one specific road, and why are we saying what circumstances will apply to that one specific road?
I think this was done in the past, so there was a, a negotiation with the community. When we did our 10-year mobility plan open house, and I don't know if you remember, a lot of people came specifically to request that Pine Avenue would not extend, right? So we kept the policy, but we revised the criteria because some of the elements that are, some of the criteria are already met. The city's already, doing some of the improvements. And I think there was a criteria for 434 to be 4-laned. We revised that language. So there are two issues, as you said. There is the new development. We are not encouraging new development that is gated.
I said it should be specific, and you can't.
There is with cul-de-sacs, and we have also language over there before the Pine Avenue policy saying that we should not vacate streets to prevent connections, because that was done in the past too. So that is something that now the city, if the city wants in those situations open the streets again or extend the streets, we'll have to have some taking, because the city vacated in the past, many years ago. So I think now it's time to correct some of the actions that were done. But this one, unfortunately, did not, the community came and they are still resisting to have Pine Avenue extended without those improvements. So we just revised the criteria.
Yeah,
But
'cause
I agree, the city will have to be more active in pushing forward and explaining why, because I think that's what is kind of lost. Why do we need more connections, right?
Well, and the problem with this particular one is, I remember your presentation, and we're not quizzing you. You're doing a great job. I just want to tell you, I
agree.
appreciate, I appreciate all the information you're giving us. So it's not like you're on the hot seat for this. We're just
I
trying
learned
to
a lot
ask
tonight,
questions.
by the way.
And I do appreciate all your answers. But for this particular one, the presentation you made when we talked months ago, and you talked about the grid pattern. The grid's the best way to get around. Well, it's not fair to the people on Pine Avenue to make the one grid, or that's the one street that's going to make a grid, because there's plenty of residences
There's other areas for
that
grids.
come onto that one, because there's this one, there's that gate at Newcastle, that goes between the two. Shangri-La, there's one map in here that I know there've been some subdivisions built, but one of these maps that was in the presentation had had Shangri-La still squeezing through there somehow. And Artesia, we talked yesterday, Artesia actually is a straight line all the way up to 426 heading to Geneva. If they could connect all the there's a bunch of little tiny pieces of Artesia, but no connections. You told me that's the one that we vacated some land, although it looks like you can still squeeze them behind houses.
That's my backyard, Bruce.
I know.
And
I know. And you want to start to look at this map.
But I bought it after it was vacated.
The diagonal road that comes in from Geneva, I guarantee you that's straight in line with Magnolia. And there's probably 100 years ago, someone said, I don't want this road coming through here. And so that's why that diagonal road came in there. That's my idea. I don't know if that's true or not. But it's suspicious how straight in line all these roads really are.
I had nothing to do with it. I know.
Are you sure?
I'm positive. I bought the house in 2015.
I guess my whole point is, it's not fair to open the grid on one street for all those people.
It needs to be opened up.
This was my question about Pine. There are other streets that we've proposed would be helpful if we're opened, or other connections we talked about in the initial transportation presentation. Do any of those streets, do all of those
Have
streets
similar
openings
policies?
are contingent upon these same threshold?
Pine-
Or no?
Pine is the only one that I'm aware of.
Right, and so that's my issue, is not that I'm advocating for Pine Street to be open. I've already made clear that, it's unfortunate that it wasn't, but now people have already moved on with their lives relying on the fact that it isn't. But that being said, the fact that we are carving out special criteria for that one connection seems to prejudice all the other people who might be impacted by other connections that would have least resistance. I'm never in favor of creating a path of least resistance towards some other population of people. And so if we're going to proceed as if Pine Avenue might someday need to be considered opening, or any of these other streets, it should have the same criteria as every other street. I don't see, without getting into the constitutional elements of it, I don't see how one particular group of people or neighborhoods can have a special set of circumstances to preclude or promote the extension of a road where everybody else wouldn't. I don't understand how
Well,
that's
you have
even
the same
legal.
scenario between McKinney and Bentley Woods, right? There is
Oh,
a
yeah, that's
connector in there
Newcastle.
that was open originally, and then got shut down.
Well,
But
any
that's-
of the millions of scenarios, not
But
that
I'm
one
just, we're just
particular.
picking one.
But
I
I'm
mean,
just
that should be
saying, like, there's a
included
lot of
in
connections
as
that we
well.
could supposedly make. We talk about, there might be takings involved for other ones. To have this one area have a special set of criteria in order to open, I believe it creates a sense of inequality across the community, where
You're
it's
saying it
this
should be all or not, or all.
all or nothing.
Right.
Like, yeah, I mean, if we're gonna give Pine Street the privilege of saying, and this is nothing, like I said, I have sympathy for Pine Street. People develop there, live there, have a certain quality of life in the expectation it doesn't go through, because that's what the city decided. But if the city is someday going to say, okay, we have to put Pine Street through, I feel like those set of criteria should apply to every connection that doesn't currently exist, or none of them. I don't believe one particular street should have a particular set of circumstances written in to our comp plan. That just seems to me very narrowly,
Well, I think
curtailed.
in this particular case that, that road will become, that will take an awful lot of traffic probably off of 434 through downtown, because people would cut through there. So that's the reason why that one had all these criteria and all these other things. Basically, the idea was to, if all these other things are done, it actually might make people not want to go through there.
Well, and
is the
and that's a
idea.
good, and I was gonna say that, and that's a great point too. We also don't wanna open up a floodgates on Pine Avenue, because that's the
Exactly.
only street that opens. So maybe we should look at, and this I doubt is gonna be something that's gonna require some thought, but maybe we should look at a set of criteria that applies across the board for opening or making connections, and there be a certain set of factors. It can't do X, Y, Z, or it must do X, Y, Z. Whereas, if we can't just open Pine Street if we're not gonna open something else, or,
Exactly.
we can't do, you know what I'm saying? Like,
No,
I don't wanna just pick one area. Okay, these people aren't protesting, let's go through there. I think it should be a standard set, and it shouldn't be just, we feel like it. I think there should be some sort of thought put into making those connections and what criteria must be involved to make those connections.
That is what's in there.
What's that?
That's what that is.
What's that?
That's the criteria.
Right, exactly, but it's just for Pine Street, so why don't we just apply that across the board for all connections?
Well, this one is specific because it talks about the surrounding areas, right, of Pine Avenue. So not all the criteria would apply, to other areas in the city.
Yeah.
But this one talks about, I think, calming devices. So, that is one way to slow traffic, right? When you have the
Except for people that
extension.
live there, calming devices are a pain in the neck. In all honesty. It depends, I guess it depends upon, when I think of calming devices, I'm thinking
You
of
think about
the
speed bumps. Yeah.
And I know that in some areas, like a perfect place for those calming devices is over on, it's in Castleberry, because you can cut through from 1792 to 436 and come out by just north of the bridge, whatever that, I can't think of the name of the street.
I know what you're talking about. I can't
But
remember.
it's got speed bumps, but they're not the kind that really jar you. They're kind of gradual.
But, yeah, but, right, but there are other means of.
There are
of doing
other
the
ways.
Yeah, traffic calming, you can chicanes or bulb outs or,
You
know,
can
narrower
narrow,
lanes.
yeah.
A grandmother with a rolling pin? One of my favorites.
Or just sit in your yard on a lawn chair with a hair dryer and.
Garden hose.
I mean, if people,
But to your point, it should be more of
But that's what I'm saying, I joke, but.
more of encompassing that
Yes.
we need to find a way, though I know a lot of the people, citizens are not going to be happy with that kind of a comment, that we need to start opening some of these roads that have been, but
But
it has
again-
to be done.
But if we open them, I think there should be certain considerations made. I don't want to see us go, this is the path of least resistance, let's open that road.
Exactly.
That is the one thing that I think we should be careful about.
So
And
what are you suggesting? Because that's,
I'm not, that would require me to be a consultant to make these suggestions, but what I'm saying from what I see in front of me, And I'm not suggesting that we look at Pine Street over any other, I have already made myself clear that I think Pine Street, it would be detrimental to open that considering all the reliance on the fact that it's been closed.
Well, no,
But every
Teresa
neighbor,
said, but Teresa said the agreement was that they widened 434.
right, if all these things happen, we'd
Which
be
is
okay
gonna
with it.
happen.
But
then
again, what if that
then they're gonna
happens
open
10
it up.
years from
Which
now?
doesn't make any sense
Well,
why
but if-
opening widening 434 is gonna make that.
Because they were saying, look, if hell freezes over, then you can open it.
Well,
That's what that
I
is.
think the rationale was improve 434 first,
Yeah.
and then, because if 434 is working better, right, so people are not going to try to escape so much to alternative modes. So first correct the main road, then, if that is, so that was one of the criteria, then,
But if we go back, I mean, 434 in that area is an E, right? E plus 15?
That is correct.
Well, and that's basically what I'm getting at is, for the folks who live on Pine Street, their concern is you open up Pine and then everybody, because 434 is a nightmare, everybody goes through Pine and then it creates a significant safety issue, which is why I would suggest we can't open until it makes sense that we don't open Pine until all of these criteria are met.
And-
My concern though is, okay, so we don't open Pine because all those criteria weren't met, but we got to open something. All of those issues that would affect the people on Pine would affect almost everywhere
Everybody,
when we
exactly.
make a connection. And so what I'm suggesting is we need to take a look before we make a connection at those specific factors specific to that area. So let's say we're looking closer to Lockwood, we want to make that connection.
but I
right?
think what people have to realize that the resistance to have all the other connections is what makes, the arterial roads be so over
Oh,
capacity.
absolutely, but. and-
Right, because
yeah.
everybody has the same argument, not on this street or not on this street.
Right.
If we open several connections,
At one time.
then we kind of, or even incrementally, right? But if we have a policy to open several connections, then traffic flows much better,
Yeah.
right? So you can imagine also that people that live over there will have quicker access to that area, right? To Pine Avenue, if you were coming. So if you have traffic calming devices, it will kind of force more local traffic instead of cut-through traffic,
Right.
right? So there are ways to mitigate that, but this argument is why it's closed and why all the other,
Right, but- and that's the
connections
thing.
are still closed too.
If we're going to look at opening connections, each time we look at a connection, I think we need to have a set of criteria that must be met to consider that connection, similar to what we're talking about with Pine Street. So let's say we're talking about connecting Lake Charm to something. I don't know why it already connects, but I didn't understand that one, but let's say we're talking about connecting Division.
Division north to Florida?
There should be a set criteria that would need to apply before we consider that connection. Because again, that's a residential street, there are no sidewalks in Mead Manor. You would create, in certain neighborhood streets, you would create a significant safety issue. So there would have to be a really good reason to create that safety issue for those residents. Same thing with, yes?
Well, extending a street should imply having sidewalks and having the proper infrastructure, right? Being
Well, of course, I
broad
hope so,
also, yeah.
but it doesn't, but the argument remains, I think we should look at, and I don't think a week is enough time to do this, maybe this is a land development code thing, and maybe this is something we can put in the comp plan could say, land development code shall have a set of criteria for opening
Road
connections.
connections.
And then we could put that criteria in the land development code. That'll give us plenty of time to work with the consultants. It doesn't delay the comp plan. But just, the overarching goal in the comp plan could be for existing connections, or to reopen connections that are not present, a set of criteria must be established, or shall be established, because we like that word. And then we'll put that criteria in the land development code, just so we can have something that doesn't have a disparate impact on certain areas versus others. That's my thought on that.
Or following exactly what you were saying, if we're trying to get the rest of this approved by, 2 weeks from now, whenever the city council is going to get to it, can there be an approval subject to this part is like to be added at a future date? You're shaking your head no.
No, we have to
No.
do it. That's the thing. So we could fix this. Sorry. We could fix this without delaying anything.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
But the criteria, so essentially we can say, I don't know, we'll have to.
Because we have another agenda item coming up in the next several months, correct? Teresa?
So,
We're going to have, I did not get it.
Isn't there- I'm trying to think of the word.
land development code?
Land
The
development.
land
Yeah.
development code's coming up next, right?
The LDC, it's going to be 18-month process, because
But
that's
all
the
this can be hammered
standards,
out
but
in
yeah.
there. So and the reason why I like the land development code for the criteria for the openings is it gives us the flexibility to change it if circumstances change.
Yeah, because this was like, in my understanding, this was like the overarching, and that was more specific.
Yeah, so I think
'cause
it's
you're getting
weird.
specific here.
I think it's weird that Pine Street in our comp plan has a specific criteria and nobody else does.
I agree.
So the way I would fix this is I would remove the specific criteria for Pine Street and then put
We'll
in,
fix it in there.
and then put a direction that all connections would have to satisfy certain circumstances as set forth in the land development code. That's what the provision would read. And then we can have the Pine Street specific criteria for Pine Street in the development code. We could take all the connections and set forth each, we could go for each desire, like take our top 10 desirable connections and set forth the criteria on when that would apply. Then people are aware, then we can't just have somebody with a swipe of a pen change a whole neighborhood. So we can have each specific sort of, like, what's our wish list? 10 roads, right? And we
Right.
can have, in the land development code, these specific connections would be considered if these criteria were met. And let's put that in our land development code rather than in our comp plan.
There was a chart in there, again, a lot of these charts that had these things, and I believe this particular one was listed in like the year 2035 section. So, I mean, we're talking about it today, but it's not like they're trying to go
No,
out and
this
make
is
this
planning.
connection tomorrow.
This is
So
planning.
it's way far in the
Right,
future.
we can't
And-
afford to
No,
do
no, we can't afford
434.
this.
This has never happened.
And I'm assuming it was on 2035 because the thought was the state would have taken care of 434
Yeah.
by that time, correct?
One would hope.
One would
Yeah, one would
hope.
hope, yeah.
Yeah.
If I may?
Sure.
With respect to that subject, for all new development, the goal would be to find those opportunities to interconnect regardless.
Sure, yeah,
You-
that's fine.
No
That makes
criteria.
perfect sense.
We got
For-
that, we
Right,
understand.
so for the existing criteria, existing
Yes.
opportunities for connection, and Deborah and I were having a little sidebar discussion, but one of the criteria, I think, could be to have, if you were to create those connections, to make sure that both sides of those connections was designed to be, to meet the complete streets criteria.
Yeah.
Which means you have, your sidewalks, which means you have, all the multimodal amenities, so that if you do make that connection, the infrastructure will be in place to create that safe
Exactly.
environment.
Yeah, a set of criteria, same thing like the Pine Avenue folks want, and rightfully so. Just to be clear, for anybody who's watching who's going to hear about this or what's going to appear on Facebook, I am not promoting or suggesting that we choose one street over, I'm just saying what the Pine Street people want is reasonable for everybody who might live on a connection. And so that's why I'm saying a set of criteria, like you just mentioned, is a great example of how we can look at each potential connection and give forth, hey,
Right.
these are the criteria that must be met in order for us to do that. And we could do that in the land development code, I think. very
I
successfully.
think that with respect to Pine Avenue, and I'm not advocating it as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
the criteria here
Because
is,
the car doors are already slamming in the parking lot.
There's some cars behind us now.
the criteria is very specific to Pine Avenue, and I think that if we were to come up with criteria, it should be more generalized to say something, like the complete streets criteria, or,
Or calming devices, right? Or
Yeah.
any kind of, that would maintain the character of the neighborhood as a local.
I like speed bumps, but more than speed bumps.
Well,
Yeah.
Right.
I know it's
A
not.
calming
just
device
speed
is
bumps.
not only speed bumps.
No, I
It
understand
can be,
narrowing the street.
narrowing the streets,
got
it can
it.
be signage, it can
No,
be-
I understand. I'm just saying, like, yes, it's odd to me. Now, I'll let the board decide whatever they want to do. It's odd to me that we have specific criteria for one street and no criteria for the others. That's
Right.
the one part, not that I think Pine Street should be developed, it's just the one part that's weird to
Well,
have in a comp plan. Like,
I
this
think-
one street will go through if
I
all
think
of these things.
Teresa mentioned that that was an agreement that was established already,
Well, right.
so that's why it's in there.
This road's been
Right,
affected
but
for
what about
20
the people
years.
who didn't show up to
or
the other?
more.
Or what about the people who will show up for the next one? Like, are we going to tell the community that if you show up in big enough numbers, we're going to carve out specific things just for your neighborhood? We can't do that.
No, but I think this
That's
is
the way it
this
works.
This is.
Well, it shouldn't.
No, it shouldn't, but what I'm saying is Teresa's already, they already did this, it's already done, this is what they've agreed to.
Yeah.
That's why it's in there,
Right.
signaled, so, but I think what we're trying to say is going forward, there has to be a more specific criteria for all these roads.
For all.
I'll leave it up to, like I said, let me ask Mr. Hall, if I may. Does the city, is the city exposed to any potential liability for an argument for, let's say a connection goes through another neighborhood that doesn't have this specific criteria, and those residents sue, suggesting that because this one neighborhood was given certain preferences over another, do they have a cause of action for fill in the blank? I'm not going to give them ideas.
Probably not, because the city, before they did a connection, they would establish criteria and objective and fair criteria. So-
If they had that.
Yeah, so the city would not do that without looking at the criteria and discussing what the criteria was and putting that into effect. So that would then negate any claim that, because there would be a public hearing,
Right.
and the citizens could appear and all, but the city would develop and would follow certain criteria for that.
But that would be if the criteria was similar to the
Correct.
criteria for
Right.
Pine Street,
And
like
that-
if the
that
similar
would then-
considerations.
That would then negate any potential claim for liability.
Yeah. If we didn't have the Pine Street specific criteria, does that allow the city to have more flexibility with that criteria for other connections?
Well, I think in this case, as Teresa and Mr. Lopez have talked about, this is specific criteria that has been agreed to, so we're probably not in a position to change it at this point. Look, going forward, other criteria, there is probably some input the city could have and some flexibility. They could have to change that criteria. Yes.
I defer. I brought up the points I want to bring up.
Well, that's what,
I just
that's
brought
what
it up
this
for the
is
conversation to the board.
Do you have any other questions?
This was on page 218, I don't know what number it was, but it talked about, I don't know what section number it was, on 2-18. There was something that talked about other agencies and reviewing, it was Winter Springs, it mentioned the county, it mentioned all other things. And my question was just, how often do we review all these other agency plans for consistencies? Yeah, right, the one in the blue, I see it, if during review, the plan identifies inconsistencies, and we talked about FDOT and Metro Planning Links and Winter Springs and all these other things. I was just curious, how often do we really review what other government agencies are doing and how it impacts us?
And why is links in there?
Yeah,
Us, I guess.
They really don't service us. We want
I know.
While we're on that
Yeah,
one,
it's
Metro
pretty-
Plan is in all caps, and it shouldn't be. That was one of my comments.
Which one? Metro Plan?
Metro caps. So I can take that off my list.
Do you have any issue with the spacing of the comma?
Actually, I have a lot of those. A lot of nitpicky stuff.
I got to leave at 7.
That's why I said I'll wait till the last.
I may leave with you.
And
You guys
I
have to
guess,
stay, we don't have a quorum.
so I guess we don't really have an answer, that was a curious
Well, no,
question.
the work programs, they do go to our Public Works Department. They're the ones who will review those other agencies' transportation plans. So they're the ones who coordinate with the other agencies.
Do other agencies contact us to say, hey, we're making a change? Does Winter Springs talk to us about what they're doing up there that's going to impact traffic through us, or, I guess that's my question.
FDOT contacts us. Our city works closely with FDOT, our Public Works Department does. And then also with Winter Springs as well.
Okay,
oh, wow.
so it does happen. What about, this was on page 233, what is the Florida Strategic Intermodal System? Highways, that's what that is? Okay, fair enough. Should I throw out another one?
Go for it.
Okay. This was in section 2-1.13.13. It talked about eliminating parking minimums and creating parking maximums. And I was like, I think this is for commercial stuff. But I thought that was kind of interesting. It's like, we're going to create a maximum number of cars. It just seems weird. Remember we talked about, X number of cars per unit when we were walking up to that one in Oviedo on the park. So now we're talking about, okay, we're not going to have minimums anymore, but we would put maximums. Is that the
Which will actually make it less.
make it less?
Right.
Yeah. Is that the logic behind that?
That was Jonathan Paul.
You're still red.
Hold it down for a
There
minute.
you go.
The logic behind that is to use more land dedicated for something that produces tax income, such as a building, rather than for parking, which doesn't really generate much tax income for a community. So many conventional suburban developments are overparked because they attempt to provide enough spaces for the peak day shopping. And so some communities are trying to discourage that excessive use of parking, which is, usually under capacity most of the year, by using parking a maximum rather than a minimum.
That also introduced metered parking as well? Pay parking?
Not in this particular policy, it doesn't, but that's something that could be considered at the land development code level.
Yeah, and this is the general direction that cities are going to require maximums to parking and abolish the minimum.
Ron, you have any questions?
In the packet you handed out earlier, the highlighted area on 2-9, mentioning the transportation concurrency exception area. Could you talk a little bit about how that was developed, why it needs to be there? Is this a new kind of term we're coming up with?
No, that is existing. Actually, this is going away when we established the mobility plan and mobility fee that New Urban is working with us. Cochran, do you want to talk about the TCA?
Sure. So a lot of cities have a TCEA, Transportation Concurrency Exception Area, and the boundaries for the TCEA are usually established to create redevelopment and growth in that specific area. And that is done by, well, just as it says, Transportation Concurrency Exception. So you're providing an area where you are going to exempt concurrency in those areas, and usually it's done in lieu of providing additional mobility strategies in that area, making sure that there's a bus shelter for, in a development, making sure that you have wider sidewalks, adequate street lighting, things of that nature. So rather than concentrating and focusing on the operations of the traffic at intersections or on segments, you're going to provide means to encourage people to not necessarily take the cars as often.
And it's more or less in the CRA, is that right? From what I was reading?
It is,
Yes,
yeah.
in the city of Oviedo it
And
is.
so we need, I guess, more specific language addressing transportation specifically? Is that why we're including this terminology?
We include the terminology because it's going to be needed until such time that the mobility plan and mobility fee is adopted. And once that's adopted, then the TCEA goes away.
That goes away. Gotcha. Thanks for that.
Yeah, it's a strange, there's a lot of the policies that have a kind of transitional language. We have to include this until such time that the mobility plan and fee are adopted, so to cover both conditions in case a new development comes now versus after the adoption.
Okay, thank you.
I had two more, sorry. This was actually, it's not in the stuff you gave us, it was on like page 2.47, 48. It was 2-2.1.2, and it talked about bicycles and that sort of thing, and it talked about us providing showers and lockers. Is that really us doing that, or is that we're encouraging if there's development that, yeah, right there, I think B, full accommodations for commuter bikers, including showers, lockers, and racks. Okay, racks is fine, but are we providing showers and lockers for people?
Well, the language says it may
May.
include,
It says may, I know, but
oh, is it developer?
it's developer?
This is development. So there is a
Oh.
lot of also additional policies in micromobility that say that if you're going to, especially in Florida, if you're going to really have people commute by bike, you need to provide showers, right? Because they will arrive, completely unable, right, to meet another human
Yeah.
being. So this is just to say, these are the things that we should encourage, and this would be
So it's not
policies
for
for
us
the.
to-
No,
It's
no,
not for
it-
us,
right.
okay.
I didn't see the phrase there. It's a condition for development approval, so
Okay.
it would
Oh,
be.
yeah, I see it up there, okay. Okay, that's fine.
If
And
you're
then the
riding a
other
bike
one,
in Florida, usually the shower's included.
yeah.
It comes with it.
And then in
Well, if you can time well, right?
in 2-2.2.10, and it's highlighted in yellow on here, it talks about PM peak hour trip generation and strategies. And that kind of gets back to what David was saying before, the question, we looked about a lot of these roads as 24-hour period, but this particular one talks about new external PM peak hour trip generation. So is that what I'm assuming? We're talking about, rush hour.
You read my mind.
Yeah, right, because I thought that someone told us at one of the other meetings that if we did something standard different than the county, that you're shaking your head, we had to somehow keep track and substantiate it as opposed to following the county. So I was
Right.
wondering why the
So-
PM trip stuff
This
is
is a
here.
different thing.
So with this particular policy, it is based off of the PM peak hour trip generation of the site, which in any traffic study, they provide daily and PM peak hour numbers for their development. And so it's easy enough for the city to say, okay, well, your site's going to generate this many PM peak hour trips, and therefore you have to accommodate for mobility strategies. So it's not a function of the roadway capacity or the level of service. They're two different
Okay.
items.
I
Yeah.
didn't understand that, okay.
So
That's all the questions I wrote down.
These are good questions.
I know that Board Member Pollock has to go in about 10 minutes, so I
No, you
wanted to answer any questions
If
you
you're
have.
fishing for a compliment, you're going to get one.
No,
No,
I would prefer questions.
you've answered all of my questions. Those were all the questions I've asked were all the questions I had, and I remain impressed with your work. So thank you very much.
Did Mr. Maggio provide any questions?
We're not
He
allowed to speak
did.
to him outside of the meeting. So.
He did, yes. And actually, I was just telling Deborah that we can go over that too.
Yeah, but thank you very much. I really do appreciate you.
Sure.
And Curtis, you do a great job too. I don't want you to feel left out.
This is my only night. Every other night it's his. He takes the show, so.
Got it. Great job. I mean it.
Don't do that to me.
No, I think he's done a great job tonight.
We're trying to-
Thanks.
Okay. In the meantime, I'm available for any
Okay.
other questions.
I want to compliment you also on the work you've done, because you've really given us some good insight that I think none of us really had until tonight.
As I,
And I know you've been on my end of my throttle, so to speak, but tonight you've done a superb job, and I thank you
well,
for that.
I appreciate it. My goal at the end of the day isn't to have the board members or the council or the citizens necessarily see things eye to eye with me. I want to make sure I educate those so that whenever you do make a decision, make a vote, that you make it based on knowledge of how things operate, how things function, what the process is, and then I've done my job.
No, tonight you've done great. I mean,
I
yes,
have a
Steve.
few questions. On the handout that's highlighted in yellow, on the second page, 2-1.1.12, why is "and downtown core" stricken?
Wasn't it double? There was one that we have
Yeah.
It was-
It was mentioned,
twice.
yeah, twice in that sentence.
Oh, okay, I didn't even see that up above. Okay, sorry about that one, okay. I think I had one other on this. Maybe not. Oh, okay. On page 2-35. Let's see here. Why was F in all of its, and 1, 2, 3, and 4 stricken?
Which one?
Which one is it, E or F that you're talking
F.
about, Steve?
Yeah.
F, and then it has the 4 criteria.
Oh, yeah.
For basically for bonus points, for credits. I mean, we talked about that a lot in some of the last workshops,
I'm not sure.
and then now all of a sudden it's been stricken. I'm just curious as to why.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good point, because we talked about sidewalks, but A, also had sidewalks was stricken there too.
235. F, and then on the next page, 4 criteria.
It's on both 35 and 36, Steve.
Yeah.
Is it a function of consistency with
So
the
I think you're
mobility,
trying- I think if I had-
mobility,
I'm
fee and
guessing,
mobility plan?
If I had to guess, is to avoid having to give them credit for those options.
In the mobility
Okay,
plan.
I thought we were trying to encourage credit, that's why we
Well, no,
offered those
but
up.
it's credit to them like a financial credit, like a tax deferment or something, as what I'm stipulating maybe.
Okay,
I mean, that's how I would read it.
The consensus here is that the mobility plan provides for more than just these 4 items, and so when the mobility plan is adopted, it would cover this and more.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, and I think what we discussed is that additional bicycle parking, streetscaping. So for instance, streetscaping, landscaping is required in the code. So we are not going to trade that for any credits.
Okay.
Right, so I think it was said, this is, first of all, these are languages, it's a language that we should have in the LDC.
Rather than
And we already have the bonus established in the land use, so we thought it was excessive.
Okay,
And,
fine. I was just curious. I have no issues with that, I just was wondering why it was stricken. Are you ready with Mr. Baggios?
Yes.
Go ahead, Jim.
So his first question was asking about the mobility plan. So he says there are mentions to until the mobility plan and the mobility fee is adopted, is there already a decision to apply a mobility fee? Is it comparable to the fire district fee currently under discussion? So this is different because at one point the county made a decision to, when they revised their transportation road impact fees, they decided to move from road impact fees to mobility fees, and at the county level. And they classified the county in 3 different zones. So there was the rural, the suburban, and the core. And Oviedo was all considered suburban. And in their fee schedule, the core was the cheapest, the lowest mobility fee, and the suburban was higher, substantially higher, and then rural was even higher. So with that, they were stimulating development at the county level in the core along I-4 and Sunrail. And we argued at that time that there are also internal dynamics in the city that were not reflected in their fees. So not all trips from the city go to the core at Altamont Springs or, So with that, we decided that we would also have our own mobility fee. And when we adopt our mobility fee, we are going to opt out from the county. Because today, if someone develops in the city, they pay city transportation impact fees and county impact fees, now mobility fees. So when we adopt our mobility fees, we are going to collect fees to improve not only the city roads, but adjacent county roads. So that is, so the city council already made a commitment to pay a study right, from a consultant to develop the mobility fee and the mobility plan. And this is what we have been adjusting the comprehensive plan, because it hasn't been approved yet, but it's different than the fire district that they are starting to discuss now. So they already discussed that they would like to move to a mobility plan and a mobility fee, but we haven't adopted yet. So we are still developing the plan. So that was his first question. Sorry, I was... Then he has, I think, minor questions, he suggests delete or actual construction in policy 2-1.119. Oh, you have it over there. Then why was shall replaced by may in this other policy? We can go to the policy to check. Then there is a proposal to interconnect neighborhoods. Shall this list need to be included in transportation element? The list of conditions to allow the extension of Pine Avenue is really extensive, so it kind of goes the same conversation.
Right.
What would you decide was leaving it?
We're just, yeah,
And then talks about scooters and why are not promoting the building of parking garages, right, instead of open air parking, which consume more land. So we promote, but because we encourage it, but it's much more expensive, right? So there is we recognize there is a cost, so we cannot require, but we certainly encourage, and I think it's part of the bonus,
right.
right, that we give. So I don't know if you want to go to the specific policies to discuss.
If I can add one thing on that, on his last comment there about the parking garages, you know, we are trying to be, as we talk about, more urban, right, in nature. You go to any city, what's all over cities? Parking garages. I mean, we're not going to get rid of our cars and be totally pedestrian. Even in our, I understand we're trying to do more urban, but it's only within 2 or 3 blocks, so it's not, you know.
Well,
So I think but you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's
No,
not, so I think parking garages, he's right on, to be honest. They might not be the most attractive. You can make them kind of attractive. There's some in
can.
Winter Park that actually
Absolutely,
look
you
pretty
you
nice.
can
So
make
you can
it
do-
attractive, you could put,
Yeah.
liner retail on the bottom floor and, and different facades on the
Yeah.
outside to make it.
Well, we have actually in the architectural design standards, we have standards specific for parking
that.
garages because we want to, allow them. And we had one project that doesn't seem to be moving forward, Madsey at Oviedo Boulevard, that was approved for 2 office buildings and 1 parking garage in the back. So we created the standards for that. So that, and you're right, and they can be very attractive, and they can be also built in conjunction with other uses. The only thing that we cannot require, right, at this point, we're not requiring parking garages because there is a cost associated, but we are certainly encouraging them.
This might be off topic, but well, sort of. So Oviedo in the park, the big parking lot, is there any plans? I mean, I know at one time there's talks about putting a garage and it kind of just fell away. Is that city's responsibility or the original developer?
So that is city-owned, land, right? So we own that parking area. At one point, we discussed a partnership to develop a parking garage, and that also goes along with relaxing some standards for minimum parking individually, so that we can have, in new development. With the master plan to have one central location for the parking, right, and people walk to the destinations, as is done in Winter Park. In Winter Park, that garage belongs to Rollins. So Rollins built the garage, right? So Rollins.
I was just curious.
But yeah, that is something that we encourage, and that is in the plan. We always discuss that in the future, most probably that area would develop as a parking garage.
I do Two more comments if I can. One was, and you mentioned this road, you mentioned McCulloch a while ago, but we didn't really go anywhere with that. I realize that's outside of our limits. I realize the issue with the rural boundary. I realize the issue with crossing the Econ River and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, does the city have any pull or lobbying capacity with any of these things? Because if you look at an aerial view on Google Maps, McCulloch goes straight all the way over to 419. There's a dirt road there right now. And Mr. Cobb at one of our meetings talked about how, you know, if these roads went through, that would take 50% of the traffic off our roads because they're all cutting through to get to Chuliota, Lake Pickett, all the other stuff that's out there. What is our capacity to heavily, you're all smiling at me. What is our
Because we put
capacity?
it in the comp plan that we wouldn't, remember? When we said we would support the county in their efforts to preserve the rural boundary.
Well, I'm okay with the rural boundary, but we can put a road through the rural boundary.
But that's,
I mean, they do all sorts of
You gotta make
things.
an exception.
They gotta, and I realize, but it's a regional impact thing. Maybe it's the state,
I
I don't know.
totally agree. I think at one point, the city will have to
They're gonna have
to
to.
face, you know, this challenge with the county and with other counties, right? Because this is Orange
Orange
County.
County, it's right on the line.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, this is,
That would eliminate a lot of the problems we're sitting here talking about with that road. And the nice thing about that one is, there's no impact on neighborhoods because there's nothing out there right now. It's just,
what I think most probably the fear is that the road will attract development or put
That is one of
pressure
the-
on
except that
development,
it's
right?
still within the rural boundary, so it's still got the, whatever, the
Absolutely,
one lot
they
for
still
5
control
acres
the
thing.
land use, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it, to your discussion, I think there was some discussion that was going to be attempted, because behind Seminole State College, there's that development, Hidden Cove, which
Yeah.
is really county.
Oh, yeah, it's outside our.
So it's outside the city limits, however, they use city facilities,
Yes.
roads primarily. But the idea was they were going to start extending that back road into, connect to McCulloch. But I don't think it's going to happen, though. I think there's been some issues.
Yeah, speaking about interconnectivity, there's a road in there right now, is it Turnberry, Turn something, I don't
Yeah, I
know, the
don't
one in the
know that.
back. There's just the vinyl fence that blocks it from that road. And
Yep, I
all
know
the
that.
people who live on the back end, that'd be okay, never mind.
No, I know people that live on that road, and I told them sooner or later that will be opened up.
this is a perfect time for me to excuse myself. Thank you all very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you
So
for your
I
questions.
do have people friends that live on that road, and I've told them that sooner or later that will come through.
Yeah.
There's no choice.
It's right there already. And the only question, now you probably don't know an answer to this one. You said back in 2008, when I asked that question about remember we talked about the legislation change? When I said, okay, if a road doesn't meet the service levels, we can deny a particular development, right? And you said back in 2008, the depression, the recession, they changed the legislation.
In 2011 or 2012, yes. Mhm.
Is anybody trying to make the legislation go back to the way it was? I mean, or is it now forever and
Not
ever?
a
You're saying-
chance.
Not a
Not a
chance.
chance.
Once you open the floodgates, you're out of luck.
Yep, not a chance.
Actually, they keep taking more power away from the cities.
Yep.
I mean, a lot of power away from the cities.
I'm done.
So the pendulum does swing both ways. When, are you familiar with the developments of regional impact DRIs? Okay, so, you know, the large developments are DRIs, and back in the 90s and 2000s, when every development that was coming in was a DRI, the Department of, it's not DEO, DCA. Yeah, Department of Community Affairs kind of oversaw that, and you had criteria that you had to follow and answer these whole list of questions. And for a DRI, that it ended up being, you know, multiple binders of documents. So rather than, you know, having just developers being able to just go at it, you had the DRIs, and then in 2011, the pendulum swung the other way, and now we're in a period where it's a little bit more easier for development to come in. So yes, there are cycles, and there are, you know, I've seen the pendulum swing, you know, at least a couple times since I've been in this career.
Does he have any more questions?
So he has those specific policies. I don't know if you want to review those.
He had the,
Unless we've already talked about them.
I mean, I saw the one that, where he said, why did this change from may to shall?
Or from shall to may?
Yeah. Let's see. I think I have. I do
Probably
have
to
that
be
one.
more flexible. I think 2-1.119 is the one that we changed, right?
Right. So this, I thought this was the one that he was talking about where the.
2-1,
2.125?
2.5, yeah.
Yeah. So in this one, and maybe you can answer this, Teresa or Deborah, because this is more, I don't do policy bit that much. So this one says, operating funds or bonds from the Oviedo Community Redevelopment Area, the CRA, redevelopment trust fund, instead of shall, it says may be secured to fund mobility improvements within the CRA.
Well, I guess may would mean that it may not also, and shall would mean that
So
it
it gives, I
would.
guess, flexibility to the city
Yeah.
as to whether or not to fund that. mobility
Must
program.
be.
Is that pretty, okay. That makes sense, though.
Was there another one?
Then 2-1.5.2,
2152. No, 2153 there.
and then what? Is there already a proposal to interconnect neighborhoods? Shall this list need to be included to the transportation element?
I like how we took out the discourage arterial through traffic. And then being facetious.
Well, we talked about it.
I know.
Is there any discussion on this one?
So he's asking if there is, if this list need to be included in transportation element. So which list?
He said 2152, right?
2-152. This one, yeah.
Okay.
And his question was what on that one?
Does this list need to be included in the transportation element? I mean, I think it's valid to include, if he's referring to A, B, and C, I believe that's valid to include it in the trans element.
But I think this is addressing more of new development, correct? More so than existing development?
Yeah, shall be designed, right? Well, the right-of-way abandonment in that end, street shall not be used to discourage through traffic. I think that is existing.
Okay.
But I don't see any list to be included in transportation element. 2-1.5-4.
Oh, yeah, he's asking about,
Oh, the
White Pine Avenue.
condition, yes.
We've had
Two-
those,
right?
Yeah.
2-1.7.5.
Alternative modes of transportation. What was his comment on that one?
He would like to see scooters being included.
Like the rental scooters, I'm guessing?
Well, we are not specifying the modes, right?
Well, pedestrian and bicycle we listed in there.
Are we?
So-
Pedestrian,
Says
bicycle
bicycle
friendly.
I mean,
design.
could we change it to say by
Mic-
providing for pedestrian and micromobility?
Micromobility, that's what I would prefer, because scooters are a little bit tricky to
So-
regulate.
Right, so the language in there, just change it from bicycle-friendly design to micromobility-friendly
Uh-huh.
design. And micromobility includes bicycles, the e-bikes, the scooters. Does it include skateboards? Yeah?
Nobody wants to get.
No? Okay.
But we're talking to scooters that are rented, Does that fall into that category?
So that's the thing, if we do not talk about scooters, we use
The
the general term micromobility, which
That would open the door for.
for other, but not specific scooters, because scooters have some challenges to regulate, right? Because people drop them and then they block ADA, so there is a lot of issues with scooters, although they, if done properly, they are good mode of transportation, but
Because of some of those, you can even block the areas that they can travel in, right, the rental ones.
the rentals, yeah, you can have the shared bike, the bikings as well.
Okay,
The original comment was, why not include scooters in here? So,
We don't have to remove bicycle friendly.
you can just, so we're gonna add micro,
so, well,
To add micromobility, right?
but, okay.
Curtis, are you already doing the changes, making the changes?
I just got this one.
Okay. Well, I think that's the only one, right, so far?
so as far as I can tell.
Mr. Rich's got John. Paul.
Actually, we've gotten rid of about half of them. That's why I decided to wait till the end.
Okay,
And so it's only down to about 5 or 6 now. So
thank you.
it's good.
And we have another 2-1.10.1,
Okay,
and I think
complete streets?
F.
Okay,
And it's also to include, that's the one we removed.
yeah, we're
So-
removing that.
That is taken care of. 2-1, point 13.13.
13 point, okay,
13.
parking.
Oh, that's the parking.
Yeah, this is the proposed language by Jonathan Paul.
Guess the line is about the max.
What was the comment?
Well, it was why we're not promoting parking garages, but we are with the bonus, right? The only
Right.
thing we cannot require.
And by increasing the density and intensity in the districts such as the downtown core, in order to reach that, you would, if they try to reach the upper limit of that, you would need some kind of parking structure in order to accommodate that.
Is it fair to say, because this is that same question I asked about considering the elimination of parking minimums that we've talked about, but it just says may consider, so this is really not any policy change, it's an idea, is really
Yeah,
what it
because we
is at
can't
this point.
mandate parking garages.
Yeah.
Well, so there are two different,
But there is coverage.
he's talking about parking
He is, garages.
requirements,
Yeah.
the number of parking,
Right.
right? To eliminate the minimums and establish a maximum.
Right, and that's what this is saying, but we're
That
not
is saying.
changing it, it's just an idea at this point. It's not saying we're going to eliminate the codes that say there have to be 3.5 parking spaces for 1,000 square feet of commercial space or whatever.
This is giving the option to, when we consider the LDC, and we have considered in the past
consider-
doing
The
that
land development.
So we'll be discussing that in the land development.
in the LDC. But this is different, it's a completely different consideration than requiring parking garages, right? The parking garage is is the structure to accommodate the parking, so.
Yeah. Is there another one?
No, that was it.
That was it?
So there is a 2-1.119 that he suggests deletes or actual construction. That was the one that we changed, so I don't know if it's still there, this language. That is the one that changed by the meeting we had yesterday.
21119?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what was the comment?
So the comment, I suggested delete or actual construction to make sure the transportation facilities needed are completed on time.
Yeah, I actually wrote that same thing down. I didn't ask it, but yeah. So basically what it's saying is something could be built and we have to build a parking to serve, is it parking? New construction. basically within 3 years of new construction, we had to do something to have its functional equivalent that results in traffic generation. Does this make sense?
Well, I think there are two things, right? Because it may be required by the development or the building, right? Are we talking about two different things?
No, I think the actual, so
Oh,
it's the transportation facilities shall be in place or actual construction within the 3 years after the
building?
yeah, the building permit.
And is a transportation facility, is that, what is that? Is that a parking garage? I mean, that's,
No,
Like train stations?
it can talk.
Any improvement?
Right, any improvement, it could be turn lanes, it could be signal.
Street, sidewalks?
You would think.
shouldn't it be done before the build? I mean, that's the biggest complaint we get, that where we built stuff and we haven't done the road improvements or whatnot. So why would we list and make it okay for the construction of a turn lane or whatever the case may be to come 3 years after the development is done?
Yeah. I mean,
No, it isn't. I agree, because people always complain, why are we building stuff before we have the infrastructure? Infrastructure being capacity, or the turn lanes, or parking, or whatever the case may be.
Well, the turn lane at Lockwood 419 was that way. Live Oak had to put that in, and it was like 5 years later before they
Right,
did it.
right.
And we suffered for 5 years.
So, I mean, can we change that? Is that doable legally, Mr. Hall?
I'm sorry, I was reading this. What was the question?
So the comment on this question was basically, why are we giving them the leeway of 3 years after they build something to construct a facility? Shouldn't it be done beforehand?
Or concurrently.
Or concurrently, yeah.
That's a good question. I don't necessarily have a good answer, except that the 3 years typically allows for delays and so on and so forth. It typically is 3 years or issue of, I think, a certificate.
Well, okay, so is that 3 years from the date of construction, or 3 years of completion of construction?
It's 3 years after the city issues a building
After
permit.
building permit.
So it's, it can be built before, right? I think it was planned, and this is going away. That's one of the ones that will go away because this is concurrency. With the mobility plan, this is going away. So this is, I think it was planned, I think we had one point that was before the first CO, to be issued, because we thought it was, the safest way. The thing is that if you have a large development and then you have phases, the impact will not occur with the first CO. So sometimes the facility is still going to be, the improvement could come in a later stage. So I think that was discussed, but this is going away
So it's
with
going
the
away, what, another 8
with the
years?
mobility plan and mobility fee.
But we're talking how far down the road? We're talking 18 months, or?
No, we are talking months.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Good. Well, then will we have to go back and re-amend this at some
We
point in
will.
time?
We
Okay.
will have to remove everything that talks about TCA and provide the
deal with
language for the,
concurrency.
yeah.
Okay. What else we got?
Are you done?
I'm done with
Okay.
with his list.
I have very few. We really knocked almost all of them out. On page 2-10, under 2-1.1.2, the long-term strategies, we spent a lot of time in here talking about safety for pedestrian safety and bicycle safety and all that, and I'm wondering why we don't add an E to that that talks about that language about safety for bicycles and pedestrians. Because it is talking about long-term strategies.
Steve, do me a favor. Talk closer to the mic, because we didn't hear what you were saying.
Really?
Really.
Wow, I used to get accused of talking too loud.
Either that or take the mask off while you're talking.
Yeah, I can do that. I don't know if that's going to help, but we'll see. But basically, we spend a lot of time in this this element talking about bicycle and pedestrian safety, and I was wondering why, under the long-term strategies, if maybe that should be mentioned in there as number E, which would lead the way, the segue for all of the other places after this in the following pages where we do talk about it. And I don't care what the language is.
Help to say mobility strategy shall address accessibility and safety for
Yeah,
vehicular?
just something like that.
Okay.
I think it would be nice to, kind of like an opening salvo, and then we go into more detail further in the latter pages in different sections.
Do you have any issues, Curtis?
No, I'll put the general statement in there.
Or if you just add safety?
Yeah, you could do the end of that and not have to have an E. We good?
That way, I think it then can open the door to further discussion.
Yeah. Okay, and the next one is on the top of page 217, and I have to commend you all for being able to read all these strike-throughs and underlines. I get cross-eyed doing this. And the worst one of all is a small letter E. It's really difficult to tell if there's a strike-through or not.
If
And
it's
this is what this
crossed or
may
not.
be. At the very top, second line down, it says implemented through the space, and there's a small E, and then it says
Oh,
comprehensive
it's
plan.
actually a lowercase c that has a strike through. So
Well, that's a C. Oh, it
yeah,
looked like
so,
an E.
so comprehensive plan was in
Gotcha.
lowercase and
Was in
then,
lowercase.
Okay. That's what happens when you're reading this at 11 o'clock at night and you're blind,
Yep.
you know, you can't do anything. Then I think we got rid of the one on the next page, 2-18, under 2-1-3-2, where Metro Plan was all capitalized, and we were going to change it down. Okay. Then on 2-1.3.7,
participation on regional committees.
no, it's the east-west transportation improvements.
Okay, you said 2137?
Yes.
That's
That's been
Oh,
stricken out down at the
okay,
bottom.
gotcha.
I was just wondering, why has that been removed? I'm sure there's a logical explanation, but
Okay, so the widening of Chapman from 426 to 434 has already been
Already
done.
occurred.
Intersection improvements, Chapman and 426 have all, yeah, so.
they've already been done?
Yeah.
So it's duplicated, so it's just a duplicate.
Okay,
I
all
have-
right. All right.
Maintain position. Yeah, I'm not sure. So there, Kurt brought up a question in one of the, or the 2137, the actual one that's being proposed. Does the city maintain a position on all of those boards?
Some of them are Public Works. So I don't know. I would have to check with Public Works.
Okay.
We don't.
Well, I know council goes to Metro Plan.
Yeah, somebody's part of that. Right.
FDOT, I don't know if anybody, that would be, Public Works would be FDOT, right, theoretically?
Metro Plan, Public Works does.
And then is there?
Links, do we have one for links?
How about like the Citizens Advisory Committee on Metro Plan?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was reading the wrong one. BPAC we used to, and I think it went to Public Works. Municipal Advisory Committee, I don't know. We'll have to check.
The mayor's on that one.
The mayor's on
The
the
mayor.
MAC,
Okay,
but a city representative would not be on the Citizens Advisory Committee. So the city couldn't maintain a position on a citizens advisory committee.
Good point.
We have to,
Is anybody on that board? I don't know.
I don't know.
Are those the same section, or will they be combined? They both have the same number, 2 point. Yeah.
Right, we changed,
so.
we changed it so that one's 2-1.3.8.
Here, I've had kind of a,
So can we
We
just
mentioned
remove the
links this a
Citizens
lot.
Advisory Committee then?
yeah.
Sorry?
we mentioned in all these reports, links that's in here. They really don't do anything for our city, do they?
There is a figure in here, the transit services, existing conditions, that show that there is one route that goes somewhat through the city, route Link 434, but and there is also neighborhood Link
The
622, which is an on-demand service that Links provides to the area that's shown in the darker shade.
Now, do we subsidize that at all?
Thank you.
No,
Okay.
not that I know of. That's the flex service.
That's a good question. Yeah, because I see the links bus, but I don't really see that much activity, you know. I mean, to me, you know, I'd rather go find another contractor that's willing to support the city on a higher level than Linksys does. Because I know for them to do more work in the city would require us to fund them more. Correct? Probably. So that's my only, you know, observation.
Is Chapman's not in the city limits, right? I mean,
Yes.
No, Chapman is out of the city.
Is it?
so when we were talking about Chapman
We have a little portion.
That's what it's, okay, yeah.
by 434, but the other end at 426, we have no control over what happens at that intersection
Correct.
at all, right?
We have the section where Evans is, right, the elementary school?
We have up to Covington.
Steve, what else you got for us?
Just a couple.
Okay.
Page 2-42, under 2-1.13.5. This may be a planning term, but it makes no sense to me. The very last sentence, it says relocating parking to areas that create a park once environment. What does park once mean?
A walkable environment where you park once and then get out and you can go to visit multiple.
I figured it was a
Services.
planning term, but to a layperson, it doesn't make any sense at all. So, okay, that's perfectly fine, and then that's another comment on 2-1-13.13, same thing, so we'll forget about that. Then the last one I have is 2-2.2.2, and there we're changing it from 500 to 100 feet. And I'm curious as to, that's a pretty large change. What is the justification or reasoning for doing that? Other than it looks like it means they don't have to put up as many shelters.
But, okay, so how many Linksys stops are there in the city? Other than the on-demand, right?
Well, that's true, too.
But shelters, we have
So
some,
basically-
right? We have at
basically what that's saying is
434.
You have to build a shelter for all the stops that Linksys has, or will have. But right now, how many stops do they have? In the city, does anybody know?
And actually, Steve, making it, going from 500 to 100 feet, I think it means they have to do more. Because before, if someone has a development that's 500 feet away,
They wouldn't have to do anything.
exactly, well,
Right.
now it's within 100 feet, they have to do it. So I think it's actually, am I reading that right? I can't
Okay,
see.
maybe I was reading it backwards.
I mean, that's-
Yeah, I think maybe you're right, now that I read that again. Again, 11 o'clock
I like
at
that
night,
map.
you're blind and brain dead.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
I mean,
only
they're
have-
good questions, because there's some of them, you know, we're looking at it, people are listening and not understanding, you know, it draws light to some of the questions.
Just a couple of quick things. I don't know if this is addressed in here or not, but I lived in Alafaya Woods and off of McKinnon Avenue, and back in the day when the development was permitted, the developer agreed that if you gave him narrower roads, he wouldn't have to, he would designate no parking on the road, therefore he got more room for houses. And what happens is everybody has 3 to 5 cars, their driveways don't fit, they all park on the road. So at any given time, there's one side of the road or the other is clogged up with cars, so it's barely passable 2 lanes. Then you get the sections where there's cars on both sides of the road and it becomes a 1-lane road. You can't enforce it. It would just, you'd have to have a cop out there every day, all day long, doing it and all night long. Is there some provisions somewhere in this traffic element to prevent that from happening again?
I would characterize that as a land development code issue.
I was going to say, that's going to be a...
I didn't know if maybe that would be complete streets, if that would be incorporated into that or something like that. I mean, because I didn't even know what complete streets actually means, because I don't think it was ever defined in this element anywhere.
A complete street could include on-street parking as well as bicycle
Bicycle,
facilities,
yeah.
improved pedestrian, wider than your standard minimal sidewalk, street trees, pedestrian furniture.
And you have
These are all
different-
things that, like
Yeah.
dimensional criteria that would be included in the land development code.
Yeah, I was concerned about when we start developing the downtown core areas and that to me, this would be important, that they don't get extra land with the promise that they're not going to let anybody park on the street, which they have no control over when they're done with their project. And then we, the citizens, have to deal with it. And it's incredibly dangerous. We call it the McKinnon Freeway anyway, because everybody speeds on it. So I was just curious about that. And then,
And complete streets vary depending on the type of street.
Right.
Right? So,
Okay.
so there is no one general standard.
okay.
Now, those may be private streets that are still owned by the developer, where they could attempt to enforce no parking. So there's a big difference between public and a private road
Oh,
that
this
is
is
then
a
dedicated
private
to the.
road.
Right.
I mean, a public road, rather. And it was just an agreement made between the developer and the city as a way to get more land to put in more houses.
Is it narrower, the right-of-way
Oh,
over
yeah,
there?
they're very narrow.
Where is this at, Steve?
On McKinnon Avenue, and most of your streets in Alafaya Woods are that way. They're not wide enough to allow for
I
safety.
would agree. I would agree with that.
It's horrible. And especially when
Because
you
a lot of
get...
people are parking on the streets.
Yeah, they have to, because they have too many cars and the driveways are too
Yeah,
short,
and
and
then if
nobody
a fire-
uses their
fire
garages
truck
to
was
park
to go
cars in
through,
anymore.
Fire trucks can't fit through there.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I just don't want to see that happen anywhere again in Oviedo, if it can,
But
I think, be easily prevented. Then just 2 last things in the compliments. One is, I thank you for putting ADA language in here. I think that's something that's grossly overlooked a lot, and I think it's highly important. And I think you guys made some really good changes through the entire comp plan, and I just thank you again for all your efforts and your hard work. And it's like giving birth to an elephant. It's very painful. And I'm sure we haven't been the most agreeable, but thank you very much, and I appreciate all the hard work.
Thank you.
I'm guessing that's the bus stops.
Yeah, in case you wanted to know, it looks like there's about 10 bus stops.
That many?
Yeah, but if you notice, they're all in Alafaya.
Right, right,
So it really doesn't do anything for the rest of the city.
right. Okay. Yeah, we could hope, maybe someday, but probably not. That's all I had.
Okay?
And let's see, Chairman Lopez, did you have any
I'm-
questions of your own?
No, I mean, like I said earlier, while we were waiting for some of the other questions to come up, I think you guys have done a great job. You've given us some new knowledge that we probably were lacking considerably. And the whole staff has done a great job. I know you guys did some overtime on Friday, getting all this together for us, so we appreciate it. It's, what you all do is a thankless job, for the most part. We're up here trying to represent the citizens and trying to educate as best as we can. So if we come across sometimes as undisciplined, or it's because we understand what the people are, the citizens are asking us on a general basis. So these work sessions are great because they're a little bit more open formatted.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
But again, I think you guys have done a great job, and I know I learned quite a bit today, especially when it comes to evaluating the ABCs of the roads, because I was like, let's just make it an F.
Right.
And I think a lot of citizens would have made that same analogy, just make it an F and be done with it. But then again, when you hear the full story, which, you know, it doesn't really, it's not projected in the plan, right? It doesn't give you that
Correct.
that picture. So most people don't know. And like us, we would say, let's just fail it. But obviously we can't, because then it causes more issues. And so, you know, so I think it's a great job. You know, my only, going back to, you know, not being, I think the language, and I understand the language, it has to be the way it is. To me, it's just very vague, and it really doesn't say anything overall. I mean, it paints a small picture. Some parts are contradictory to other parts, but I understand that that's how you have to write some of these to make compliance with the state.
Right, and I think you're going to find, you know, the comp plan is written to be kind of at a higher level, you know, higher altitudes, so, and big broad strokes when we do get to the land development code and where things are really spelled out much more specific. I think that there will be a lot more opportunities there to make sure that,
We can fine tune it.
right,
How's that? We can put our,
So how is this going to go Tuesday?
Yeah, I
Or
was gonna ask that question.
whatever,
What is
the
the-
public shows up, they will make their comments to this, we'll agree or disagree, and then make
well,
one
it'll be a public
motion.
hearing, so we'll hear from staff. Staff will give us another summary. That would be Deborah, or who's going to do it?
You'll get something from staff,
We'll get something from
a
staff.
presentation from
Okay,
staff.
and then we can open it up to public comments, and people will show up, which I advise, you know, suggest, you know, if they're listening, come on out and, you know, say your piece. It's important that, you know, not only the staff hear what you have to say, but we have to hear what you have to say. And council also listens to those meetings as well, so I encourage everybody to show up, and then we'll take a vote.
Is there any more, will there be other discussion for us that night?
Yes, so
Stuff,
before,
we'll
we'll
do
make
the
a
same
motion,
thing.
you know, once the public hearing is closed, you know,
Yep.
we'll make a motion. We can approve the motion, then we'll have our internal discussions as normal.
Are there-
So two things, we are going to make those changes and we're going to incorporate the, you know, the map that was not there, and we probably will send the whole packet to you Monday, most probably Monday. So Monday you receive all the elements that we already discussed in the transportation, and I'll reach out to the two members that were not here today to see if they have any questions, if they want to sit, you know, with us. And from now on until Tuesday, if you have any additional questions or if you see anything, let us know, because we, you know, it's still not adopted, so we can still make some corrections or changes.
Will this be a final version, or will it be a mark and strike up again?
It should be
We'll
final.
have both.
It'll be both.
Okay.
So we have the strike, we have to show the strike through because we want to see what, to everybody, to be transparent, what we are changing, right? But we also have the clean copy.
Yeah, the state requires the strike through and underline because they want to know what's changing.
I saw Emma's email earlier today about the transportation master plan. I know you responded to her. So is what she was talking about, a master plan, is that different than the document we're talking about here, or is that?
So that is the document I gave to you. I made a
That's
copy.
this, That's this
Yeah.
thing here.
This is we had one from 2009, and this was the updated 2017. So this is incorporated in the comprehensive plan. So it's not,
So does the LDC
You know,
get
we've seen
updated
so many
on the same
documents.
cycle as the comp plan every 7 years?
Well, no, I
No.
mean, we've seen so many documents that, you know, we have our own private jobs that we have to attend, and we do this, you know, for the goodness of our hearts, I think, because we feel better for the community, but we've seen so much that it's almost becoming a blur.
Yeah, so when you mentioned we'll get that on Monday, I mean, please, I know it's stressful for all you guys, but if it's Tuesday that you get it to us, I probably won't see it before the meeting Tuesday night, just because of, I have another job during the day.
well, it's the
so-
same document you already saw,
Exactly.
right?
So
So I,
basically, it's everything we've already hashed out.
That's what I
yeah.
thought.
But with those little corrections that we discussed today, so there were two minor changes, right, being
Yeah,
done.
just two.
And then the map that,
That was missing prior.
That was
and,
missing
yeah,
prior, we're
all
gonna-
of the little things that Board Member Rich had brought up, the little,
And then the changes that Rich
Right.
presented to us at the regular meeting, did you all take a look at those?
Yes, those are incorporated. I
were
think.
already
Oh, they were,
incorporated,
okay.
yeah. And to answer your question, so the land development code, we are going to start now. In May, we are going to take to council the LDC committee, because we are creating a committee. And with that one, we will try to do something different with the LPA, that we are going to have incorporate in our regular meetings discussions on a specific chapter or article of the LDC before meeting with the committee, so that we can bring, the suggestions from LPA.
Yeah, but is the LDC amended every 7 years like the comp
No.
plan? Can it be amended more often?
Yes.
Okay.
The statute requires that once you adopt a comprehensive plan, that you have 1 year to adopt the land development code changes.
But it doesn't have the same
It's not
cycle.
on the same cycle.
Okay.
That's the only requirement for LDC.
Are there any other agenda items for Tuesday?
No.
Are you kidding?
Just a small caution
We'd
reminder.
all walk out.
I just want to make a small caution reminder. Staff will be transmitting these to you, probably to everyone. Please do not reply to all. That creates a meeting, and we don't want to do that before Tuesday night. So just a minor caution reminder.
Law kind of gets a vague in there.
Yeah, that kind of, pulls it in, so we don't want to have that issue. Thank you.
Agreed. Is there any other questions from us? If not, I think we can adjourn, right?
Thank you all. Thank you all for
Thank
the
you.
comments, the
Thank
reviews. Thank you.
thank you for your
So
time.
this was the easy one, right, compared to the LDC? This is the warm-up.
But the LDC is also more tangible, right? People,